Good morning, everyone. It is Mary, and it's time for another episode of Monday Morning Leadership Bites. This is going to be a quick one because I am about to fly out to Mexicali. So I'm just doing this real quick. And one of the topics that I get a lot of requests on is the topic of communication and leadership. And what's interesting about that is I sat with that topic for a little bit. Wow, there's so much written about the topic of leadership. There is so much that has already been done on leadership. And another one of those terms that if you Google it, you would get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of results and different people telling you a lot of different things. Some conflict, some are building upon other ideas. And what I have found is that there's a lot to it, right? So I refer to communication as an uber dimension. And what I mean by that is that there are other competencies that are built underneath this term communication or effective communication. Oftentimes we talk about effective communication. And how do leaders become more effective in getting their message across? But a lot of that has to do with their style of communication. Not everybody speaks the same way, and yet it can still be effective. It has to do with the situation that they're in. It has to do with the audience that they're giving their talk to. What works for one audience might not work for another audience. If there's conflict in the situation, how does one be effective with all these different things going on? And what's interesting is that regardless of the effectiveness of the communication, what's interesting when you look at the research of employee engagement and what is important for an employee to feel engaged or someone who reports into you to feel engaged with you as a leader. And communication comes up time and time again. I've never or rarely have ever heard these statements. I'm not going to say never, but I've not heard them. I can't remember hearing them, but I don't think you would ever hear these statements or rarely would ever hear these statements. Statement one would be, boy, I wish my leader would stop communicating and giving us information. It's too much. I've never heard that. I've never heard of, our leaders communicate with us too much. Never heard that before. I've never heard, we hear enough from our leaders. We don't need to hear any more. Never heard that before. It often when you're talking with people, regardless of where they are in the organizational structure, so from the top to the bottom, is I want more communication. I want to know more information about what's going on. So this is a really hot topic in this communication. So how do we get better at it when there's all these different dimensions to it? And let me add some more complexity to that. When you think about technology has actually made the whole communication process even more difficult. Where things like email and instant messaging and text messaging was meant to help the speed of communication, and it has. We can get communication and communicate with people a lot faster. We've lost some of the intent behind our communications, and we're often trying to go back and re-explain things, or we're communicating so fast that we're forgetting who the audience is, or maybe that mode of communication is not the appropriate mode of communication for the message you're trying to get across. But you got technology, you got the fact that our lives are super busy, people are sleep deprived. That's a new study that's come out that a lot of people are not getting enough sleep. We're overworked, we're stressed, and we're trying to get this effective communication to go across. And we wonder why it doesn't happen. And so in our little super busy lives, we're trying to get things done. We can't slow down enough to get a lot of communication. And then communication has a lot of layers to it. So it's not just your ability to provide a message, this one-way communication or two-way communication. Can I deliver the right message? Can I have a conversation with someone? It's not just that. There's so many other layers that go into it. Things like trust, things like your business acumen, things like your ability to be a good team player. There's all these other layers, and oftentimes when I have someone who's asking to be a better communicator, we don't talk about the actual mode of communication or how to physically communicate. We start talking about, does your team trust you? We start talking about things with what's the message that you're delivering. and how are you delivering it. It's all these other elements that are underneath it of this effective communication. And if I can fix some of those other elements, you come across as a better communicator. All right. And another statistic I found from Psychology Today is the attributes of a successful leader. Communication is 35% a part of that. So a third of your ability to be a successful leader is your ability to communicate. And if you are derailed in your career or derailed as a leader, it accounts for 53% of your communication. That's just crazy. So yes, it's a third of what means to be successful. But if you're not successful or you have not come across as a great leader, communication accounts for 53% of that derailment. To me, that was mind-boggling because, and it actually speaks to the whole multi-dimensional aspect of communication, that we can be really good communicators, but what people see when we're successful is the other elements that are underneath that. But the first thing they see when we're not being great leaders is our ability to communicate. So real quick, I want to give you 5 tips on being a great communicator. So number 1, this might surprise people. If you want to be seen as a great communicator, your number 1 thing is you have to learn to be an active listener. And what I mean by that is that you're not just sitting there listening to someone and taking it all in and waiting for them to be quiet so you can tell them what you really think. Active listening is you take into whatever that person's saying and you internalize it and you make it your own and then give them information based on what you heard from that person. It is a skill set that a lot of people just, every time you tell someone they're going to take an active listening class, they go, oh, great. And they're not really excited about it. But let me tell you, that's the number 1 thing. If you can become a really good active listening and a participative listener, we often are trying to wait until someone stops talking so that we can then insert our opinions. Number 2, being adaptive in your communication. And that's got a lot of legs to it. 1 is having an adaptive style of communication. 1 is adapting to your audience. And 1 is just adapting to the situation. But you've got to monitor what's going around and say, okay, is this the best way to communicate? Number 3 is be positive. Even in situations where things aren't going well or there are issues that are going on within the organization, try to be positive. And not that you're glossing over anything, and not that you're not providing bad news, but can you be positive about it? That, you know what, we're going through this really tough time, but we're a team and we're going to get over it. And I got to stand in a stand-up meeting with someone recently, and they've got a really tough road ahead of them. And what was interesting is how that manager said, hey, I know you guys are working hard. After he gave his bullet points, like, here's the bad news, he goes, I know you guys are working hard, and I'm going to be right here next to you, and I'm going to give you as much information as I possibly could. People walked away with a sense of, we can get this done. Even though we're in a tough road ahead, to get this done. Being positive. Next, be clear and concise. Trying to come up with fancy words. I used to have a boss who talked about $10 words when a $1 word will do just fine. That we don't have to get fancy in our communication. We can be very clear. Again, you're adapting to your audience. So sometimes just a simple message that's concise and clear is all you need. And no more. There's no elaboration that's required. Often it's the repetitive of that clear, concise communication, right? So we can sometimes break down messages in advertising, and those clear messages that kind of get stuck in your head are the ones that are memorable, not the complicated messages. And so being clear and concise and repetitive with that message and consistent with that message is important. So be clear and concise. And then my last tip for being a great communicator is to be authentic. If you don't know, you don't know. If you can't say, then you can't say. But then tell people that. Hey, there's a lot going on right now, and I'm not privy to tell you a lot of what's going on, but give me some time, and as soon as I know the information, I'll let you know. Something like that. So you're being authentic, that you're saying, yes, I do know as a leader more than maybe what you know, but I can't share it because then you're breaking trust with your peers, and people will respect that if you let them know, hey, there's more coming, and I will keep you informed, and you stay true to your word, which has to do with your trustworthiness as a leader. Then people will follow that. So those are your 5 tips. Thank you for listening, and remember to like, share, put some comments. What's your leadership style? I want to hear from you. We're going to explore this topic a bit more, and we'll probably come up again as we look at it from different angles. So this won't be the last time we'll talk about communication because it is such a meaty topic. But please provide me your comments on what you think so far about communication, and tell me what your best communication tip is. I've given you my 5. What's your best communication tip? Go ahead and give me the comments down below, and I'll see you next time on Monday Morning Leadership Bites. Bye.